Tennessee's defense was a whole lot better this past fall, and it appears Tim Banks isn't going anywhere. Finalizing a contract extension with Tennessee, Tim Banks set to return to Knoxville. All that and more, plus one of his star defenders sidelined. This is your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into today's edition of Locked On Vols, presented by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, where new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com to go ahead and get started today. Got a lot to get into today. Tim Banks finalizing a contract extension, it appears, with Tennessee. To me, that's not news. Okay, you know, if you listen to this podcast and if you are a member of VolQuest.com, it's been reported that he's had a contract extension ready to sign on his desk for quite some time. Will anything change in that regard? We'll figure out the language once everything's officially, set and done, probably in the coming days or maybe a week or so. But it does appear that Tim Banks is coming back, so we'll kind of get into that and why that's a good thing for Tennessee. I understand there's some frustrated fans. I understand there was 2 bad losses this year, 3 losses, but the Arkansas game wasn't on the defense, right? And we'll get into that. But Tim Banks is coming back, and that is a good thing for Tennessee, in my opinion. One of the star defenders might not be ready to go for the start of the season, projected to, but we know how injuries like this, especially with an ACL tear, and that's what All-American cornerback Jermod McCoy has done here in the offseason. First reported by VolQuest, Austin Price getting that injury while getting some offseason training back in Texas. We'll dive into that and what that means for Tennessee. And then here's a take that I heard earlier this week about Nico Iamaliava. Is he a bust or is he not a bust? I think it's a tough take to call him a bust right now. We'll get to that in segment number 3. We'll talk some hoops tomorrow. I know Tennessee and Georgia was last night. I was going to talk about that here today, but just a lot on the calendar here, and we're going to talk some football. So let's start with Tim Banks. Clearly, Tim Banks is either, loved by some fans or not appreciated by some fans, and I'm not going to tell anybody how to fan. That's not my place. I think for the first, 2 years specifically, 3 years, I guess, it's easy to kind of make him a scapegoat. It's easy to kind of, say that it's all his fault, the defense wasn't producing. We're not going to go all the way back down memory lane here, but it's, bad memories, right? I mean, think about where Tennessee's defense was in 2021. Think about everybody that left. Think about how you were playing 3 linebackers. Think about the talent that was on the roster, the amount of talent compared to the amount of talent that's now on the roster. You got to give these guys some credit. Martinez, Banks, Inge this year, John Marie before him, Rodney Garner, Chop, of course, Mike Eckler, all these guys. I mean, they've developed and they've produced a really solid defense. How solid was that defense this past year in 2024? Well, it gave up 209 points and allowed 3,812 total yards. Okay, you want to put that in perspective? 209 points allowed in 2024, 3,812 total yards allowed. That was this past football season. In 2021, Tennessee's defense allowed 378 points. Okay, so you went from in 4 seasons, 3 seasons since, you went from giving up 378 points to 209 points. You went from giving up 5,482 total yards to giving up only 3,812. That is not bad. Not bad at all. Tennessee's defense gave up 16.1 points per game, held all but 3 of its opponents to under 20 points. We'll get into more of that here in a moment. 8 of its 10 Power 4 opponents to under the season average, scoring average. Tennessee's defense ranked in the top 20 in several different categories in the nation. Total defense was 6 overall. That's really, really good. Third down conversion percentage was 7th. Before the Ohio State game, or before the Georgia game in late November, I want to say that was like 4th in the country, but they slid to 7th because of those 2 bad games in third down percentage. Fourth down conversion percentage, 3rd in the country. First down defense, 17th in the country. Rushing defense, 10th in the country. Team tackles for loss, over 100 for the 3rd year out of 4 years with the staff. Had over 100 tackles for loss. That was 8th best in the country this year. Again, not too bad. Not too bad at all. The reason, okay, the defense was the reason Tennessee made it to the college football playoffs. You went from a high-flying, explosive offense the first couple of years in the system to not a very good defense having to outscore everybody. Well, it kind of flipped, especially this year, right? I mean, the offense wasn't horrendous, but the offense has lost some pop, and that's something we've talked about and something that Josh Heupel's got to figure out this offseason. It's got to get back to having some pop through the air and being explosive and those type of plays, better in the red zone, all that and more. But the defense has come around, obviously, this year. 12 regular season games, okay? This is excluding the playoff game because I'm looking from a story that I wrote in December. 12 regular season games. It's been the best defense Tennessee's had this century. 167 points allowed through the 12 regular season games, the lowest mark since 1999. Held 10 of its 12 opponents overall to under 20 points, 10 of its 13 overall opponents if you count Ohio State. Tennessee began the season holding its first 9 opponents to under 20 points. That streak was actually stretched to 10 games if you included the Citrus Bowl at the tail end of 2023. You want to look at, game by game in terms of points allowed. 2 of the 12 ball games, opponents scored touchdowns on either special teams and or defense, thus not against Tim Banks' group. One of those instances was against Vanderbilt. It was the kickoff return for a touchdown to begin that game. And, the Commodores would have been held below the 20-point threshold if not for that special teams, kickoff return that it allowed. UTC, field goals, all it had. NC State, a field goal and a pick six contributed to its 10 points. Okay, so the pick six is on the offense. Kent State, shutout. Oklahoma, a field goal and 2 touchdowns. Okay, so it allowed 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Arkansas allowed a field goal, a touchdown, a field goal, and a touchdown. That was a loss. Florida allowed 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Alabama allowed 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Kentucky allowed 2 touchdowns, a field goal, and a 2-point conversion. Mississippi State, 2 touchdowns. Georgia was the outlier, 4 touchdowns and a field goal. UTEP was a shutout. Vanderbilt was a kickoff return for a touchdown. 2 touchdowns allowed and a field goal for 23 total points. Again, this is, this is the best defense Tennessee's had in quite some time. And sure, the next step for me in looking at Tim Banks and his progression is you got to show up in those big games. Tennessee won 10 games this year, went to the college football playoff, but the only thing people are wanting to talk about right now is the Georgia game and the Ohio State game, and rightfully so. I mean, Tennessee didn't even show up offensively or defensively in the college football playoff game. The Georgia game, Tennessee got off to a really, really good start. Couldn't hold it, couldn't sustain it, couldn't stop anybody defensively. And taking that next step, breaking down that next barrier, you have got to show up and perform in those games. I thought Tennessee did a great job against Alabama. At the time, Alabama, it's still a massive win, don't get me wrong, but at the time it was a really, really, really good win. It's still your best win on the season. But that's, knocking off a team that, put up, 34 against Georgia in the first half or whatever. You've got to take that next step, and you got to show up in big games, especially on the road against the Georgias of the world, and of course in the Ohio States in the college football playoffs. This staff under Tim Banks have produced several NFL players who are contributing on rosters right now. Not all of them picks, but most of them picks. Matthew Butler, Theo Jackson, Alontae Taylor, Byron Young, who's just a star. Kamal, I know weird seeing Byron Young and Jared Verse playing together. That could have been a nice little tune down here in Rocky Top, but at least it is in the National Football League. Kamal Haddon, Jalen McCullough. Yes, Jalen McCullough, who has played a key role for the LA Rams in the secondary this year. James Pierce is about to be a first-round draft pick. So you got to give him the flowers at some point, right? Tim Banks and his staff, got to give him some flowers. Am I here saying that Tim Banks is the best defensive coordinator in the country? No. I was talking to one of my buddies, and he'll text me as soon as he hears this, and he'll say, thanks, you're welcome for the free content. He was like, what do you think this deal is going to be? And we'll see what the language is, okay? We'll see exactly what it is, but I'm thinking anywhere, usually assistant coaches are on 2-year deals. We'll see if it's a 3-year deal, but 2-year deal, he was getting paid 1.5. He's going to get a raise. I bet he's close to 2, okay? And if you take that $2 million marker, according to coordinator salaries entering the 2024 campaign, I know this might not be accurate anymore because some guys have moved around and gotten some, raises and all that. That would put him about 3rd in the SEC, around 4th or 5th overall in the country as highest paid coordinator. Blake Baker of LSU, $2.5 million. Again, this is salaries prior to the 2024 season. Wink Martindale, who's been rumored to leave his job, $2.3 million at Michigan. Pete Golding in the SEC at Ole Miss, $2.15. Adam Fuller at Florida State is 2.015. There's a group of guys making $2 million heading into the 2024 season. USC's defensive coordinator Al Golden at Notre Dame, Glenn Schumann at at Georgia. And then where I'm projecting around the $2 million mark would be just ahead of Jim Knowles. Of course, we'll see if he gets an extension and a raise, and Phil Parker of Iowa, and of course Knowles of Ohio State. So we'll see what happens, but I'm thinking he's probably going to make somewhere around $2 million, and that's kind of where that would be in terms of the pecking order of coordinators' salaries in college football ahead of last season. I know that it might be updated from now, but ahead of last season. So I think this is a good move for Tennessee, right? I mean, you can't diminish what you're paying coordinators because now you're paying players. It's just not going to work that way, okay? Just as players are demanding so much more nowadays, coaches will demand so much more nowadays. What are the driving forces in name, image, and likeness negotiations and all that? It's agents. Well, newsflash, coaches also have agents, and they probably have better agents because they can afford it and because they're more experienced. You can't just take a slouch and say, well, you can find somebody cheaper to pay the players. No, that's not how it works. It will not be how it works. That's not how it's going to work, moving forward. I think this is a good move. I think Tim Banks has been very underappreciated here. I very much recognize that the Georgia game and the Ohio State games are two biggest games on the schedule. Not very good performances. I get that. And I've talked about it. I mean, I've been on record. I've been at VolQuest and right here on this show. You guys who listen every day, #everydayers, you've heard me say this plenty. So this isn't like it's a new tune I'm singing here. Okay? In-game adjustments have got to be made. When your front four isn't affecting the passer, you've got to have a changeup. You've got to have a plan B. You've got to have a plan C. And I haven't seen that in these games. Florida 2023, Georgia 2024, Ohio State 2024. I haven't seen a plan B. And you've got to have a plan B and a plan C, because if your front four isn't getting there, it isn't affecting the passer, what's your move? And that's my challenge. That's what I want to see improvement on for Tim Banks and this staff. Tim Banks is the play caller, Tim Banks as the game planner and all that. But overall, I mean, he's been phenomenal here at Tennessee. I mean, stats don't lie. We can all have opinions, but stats literally don't lie. Look at the stats from 21 to 22 to 23 to 24. It's been improvement every single year, and it's been humongous improvements from 21 to 22 and from 23 to 24. I mean, astronomical improvements between those two off seasons. And Tennessee's defense should be really, really good once again in 2025. However, you might be without one of your star players at the beginning of the season. Hopefully not, but Jermod McCoy's injury, reported by Austin Price on Wednesday, that's big news. Let's dive into that, what it means for Tennessee, and what that plan B and C is. All that and more right here on a Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going on. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate and has a variety of bets to keep every single game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com today to go ahead and get started. New customers will get $300 in bonus bets on your first bet. That's FanDuel.com. Join today. Again, get started with $300 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey guys, welcome back into your Thursday morning edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. Wednesday was an action-packed newsworthy day, and we're going to continue to roll on and react to the news. Austin Price reported on Wednesday afternoon that Jermod McCoy, Tennessee's All-American, All-SEC cornerback, is going to miss spring practice after tearing his ACL during off-season training session back at home in the state of Texas. Price writes, McCoy has already had surgery to repair his knee. Additional sources have told us at VolQuest that the projection is to return near the start of the 2025 season. So, again, that's good news, all right? Hopefully he won't miss much time. But, that's why we write, talk about language and contracts with Tim Banks. That's why you write in this story here, projected to return near the start of the 2025 season. There's no guarantee that Jermod McCoy is going to be ready to roll game one. There's also no guarantee that he's going to miss 10 games. It depends on the patient. It depends on the recovery. It depends on the rehab, all that and more. It depends on the surgery, the severity of the injury, all that and more. It truly does depend on everything. Adrian Peterson, gosh, man, he like record time recovering from a torn ACL and came back and had some really, really good years for the Minnesota Vikings towards the tail end of his career. But this is a big loss, right? Jermod McCoy, obviously just a huge, huge piece to the puzzle of why Tennessee's defense was so good that we talked about with Tim Banks in segment number 1. Totaling 696 snaps, defensive snaps for Tennessee, leading the defense. The injury to McCoy is a tough one for Tennessee and obviously for Banks. He had 44 tackles, tied for the team lead with 4 interceptions, had 13 pass breakups. He was a Thorpe Award semifinalist, which is given out to the nation's best cornerback. He was second-team All-American for his play by the Associated Press. I think he was a second-team All-American or second-team All-SEC by the AP maybe, but he was first-team by the coaches, whatever the case was. He was one of the best defensive backs in the entire country. And for Tim Banks, which again, Chris Lowe is the one that reported that he was nearing contract negotiations, finalizing a deal. We'll know when it's all officially official, right? Tennessee will make that announcement when it's officially official. But he's expecting big things out of Jermod McCoy, and then this is going to be a tough break. He's going to miss spring practice, all right? He's going to be on rehab and all that. And the difference is, a football player, it's all about lateral motion, right? You want to be, north, south, fast, 40-yard dash time and all that. But football player is about planning. Pick any position you want. Wide receiver when you're running, planning, making a move. Quarterback when you're dropping back, planting that foot, throwing. Running back whenever you're running, planning, and making a move. Defensive backs when you're literally backpedaling, planning, driving to the football. Same thing with safeties. Linebackers, you're reading, reacting. Oh, there's a counter, change of misdirection, plant, go. It's all about planning, moving, lateral movement, all that type of stuff. And so that's why it's such a tough injury for football players. Now, back in the day, it sometimes was career enders. That's obviously not the case anymore. Hopefully McCoy can, hit the training room hard and the rehab room hard, and he'll be back, ready to go for the season. That would be awesome. But this is going to be one to pay attention to for sure. And then once he's cleared and ready to go, what's that workload look like the first couple of weeks, in my opinion? I don't know. We'll have to see. So projected to be back for the, near the start of the 2025 season, which is huge. That's great. But until then, hello, Ricky Gibson, who had a fantastic season this past year as a sophomore. He was really, really solid. 32 tackles, 2 TFLs, 5 pass breakups, had a forced fumble, played 636 snaps, which were second most to that of Jermod McCoy. Gibson was really, really good. So he's going to be QB1 until further notice. It's a good thing that Jalen McMurray is also in the cupboard as well. Formerly of Temple, Tennessee got him to come over via the transfer portal last year. He was the first option off the bench to back up either side. Cornerback last year, McCoy on one side, Gibson on the other. He played some snaps, 14 tackles, 4 pass breakups, 264 snaps. I thought McMurray was solid. And now McMurray's going to have to step up and elevate his game and be QB2, or excuse me, CB, cornerback, not quarterback, CB2. And I think that he's ready for that. Of course, Tennessee's got Caleb Beasley, freshman that saw a little bit of action this year. Not much at all, but, high hopes for a guy like Caleb Beasley. Marcus Gorey from Bradley Central. You're bringing in a lot of guys like Tyler Redmond and some of these younger guys in this recruiting class. How quickly can they come along? They're going to get a ton of experience and reps as early enrollees in spring practice. And this isn't the worst thing at all. Like, spring practice is to see what you have and to build depth and build, growth in your roster. McCoy's not going to be in the equation anymore. You know what you have in Gibson, okay? For the most part, you know what you have in McMurray. Man, I'd love to see a whole lot of Caleb Beasley, a whole lot of Marcus Gorey, a whole lot of some of these young incoming freshmen. I want to see all those guys. Trey Petit, I want to see all those guys. And that's why earlier on Wednesday, before the news broke that Jermod McCoy had torn his ACL, stories begin circulating that Tennessee is trying to work on portal commitment for Arizona State cornerback Kendrick Breedlove. And everybody's sitting here kind of like, well, what in the world? Why is Tennessee going after a quarterback? No, we need linemen. We need wide receivers. We need a running back. Well, this makes sense. This makes sense. 100% this makes sense now. Tennessee has a cornerback, suffer an injury. Tennessee's going to go and try to get a cornerback out of the transfer portal. Kendrick Breedlove, Nashville native, okay? He played the 2024 season with Purdue. Prior to playing with Purdue in 23, he played at Colorado. Prior to Colorado, he played 2 seasons at Ole Miss. So he went from high school to Ole Miss for 2 years, Colorado for a year, Purdue for a year, and now he's committed out of the transfer portal to go play for Arizona State. Tennessee's trying to work, trying to flip that commitment, trying to get him on campus to see kind of what he's all about. 5'11", 185 pounds. Strong season for the Boilermakers this past year, starting 11 games, 40 tackles, 2 TFLs, a team high 3 picks. Sources have indicated to VolQuest that he should be in town, for a visit, but we know how those work. We know how all those work. You got to get him here. Things can always change. If I'm Arizona State, right, I'm probably saying, whoa, what can I do to make you not go visit Tennessee and go ahead and lock this down and get you on campus now? If I'm Arizona State, that's what I'm doing. But now, because of the injury to McCoy, Breedlove or just cornerback in general has become a massive, massive priority. It is. And then once McCoy comes back and gets back into the fold of things, Breedlove will be just great depth. Fantastic depth. So, interesting stuff here. Not the news that you want to hear. Is it the end of the world? No, because McCoy's going to make a full recovery. He's going to come back. He'll play in 2025. In my opinion, he'll play the majority of the 2025 season. But this will be something to watch leading up to the season. Don't just assume that he's going to be ready to go snap one, game one. Maybe he's available. Maybe he doesn't start the game. Maybe he doesn't play all the snaps available. I don't know. We'll have to see. But this is not the news that you want to hear, especially for anybody. But especially for a guy who's your best defender, who's your All-American, who has been such a bright spot for your defense, that has been such a bright spot in 2024. It's not what you want to hear. But, hey, football is a contact sport, and he was trying to work. He was training, trying to get ready to roll, and that stuff happens. Off-the-field injuries, it stinks, but it does happen. And unfortunately, Jermod McCoy suffered one of those here in the offseason. Already had surgery to repair it, and the rehab process will now begin. All right, when we come back, one personality said that he's leaning towards calling Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaliava a bust instead of a boom. We're gonna dive into that. We're gonna have a conversation. I've been talking about Nico a lot this week and trying to compare him to other quarterbacks and all that. We're gonna play that game once again, but we're gonna hear the clip and we're gonna discuss it, all that and more, as we continue on with the Thursday morning edition of Locked On Vols. This message is brought to you by PrizePicks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, PrizePicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, PrizePicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now, it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on all the action than over at FanDuel, or than over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players. If your picks hit, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, it's all about the hot takes this season. This week on PrizePicks, I'm looking at Lamar Jackson, more than 250 passing yards. Travis Kelce, more than 70 receiving yards. That Kelce one makes me a little bit nervous. I think I'm good on Lamar. It's fun to predict, and it's easy to play. Plus, with PrizePicks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly when you put your first $5 in lineup. That's right, $50 for just playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with PrizePicks. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Hey guys, welcome back into your Thursday morning edition of Locked On Vols. We talked about some pretty big newsworthy items. Expected to finalize a deal with Tennessee to remain as the defensive coordinator. That is Tim Banks finalizing a deal. We talked about it on VolQuest. We talked about it here on this show before. Chris Lowe put it out there yesterday that the two sides are nearing an agreement, so that should be official here in the coming days. I would assume, but Tim Banks looks like he's sticking around Tennessee, and that was expected, and that's good to, in my opinion, that's good for the program. Also talked about in the last segment, injury update. Well, torn ACL for Tennessee's Jermod McCoy. Unfortunate, going to miss spring practice. Expected back towards the beginning of the 2025 season. So that's something important to remember there. This final segment, again, we'll talk hoops on tomorrow's show. Don't worry. This final segment comes from a clip from Josh Newberg, who's an On3 personality. I work for VolQuest.com. We're an On3 affiliate, okay? He's in the family. I've met him a few times. Good dude. I like his work. He works really, really hard, does a great job behind the microphone. I don't agree with this, and that's fine. There's a lot of things that I say that people don't agree with, and that is A-okay. But Josh Newberg had a comment about Nico Iamaliava during a segment that he does boom or bust, clearly looking back at past recruiting cycles, highly rated prospects, and saying to this point in their career, are they a boom, like they hit on that, the projection was right, or are they a bust? And he said he's leaning towards calling Nico Iamaliava a bust. So for context, let me read this quote to you here from Josh Newberg. Said, quote, just looking at the 2024 resume, we have some respectable numbers. Not terrible at 19 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, 70.6 QBR, but not eye-popping numbers either. So the question for Tennessee fans is, does this production match up with the NIL earnings at Tennessee? Remember, about 2 years ago, I believe it was The Athletic that reported Nico Iamaliava signed with Spire Group, and he was scheduled to make or is making $8 million over 3 years. That's a lot of money. Okay, he goes on to say, so we get to boom or bust. I know it's really too early to officially say it. That's context right now. He does acknowledge it's too early to officially say it, but then he says, I'm going to say it. Right now, I'm leaning bust. What we do know is he's going to be the starter. They're putting pieces around him. Mike Matthews is returning. It's not over yet, but I know he's not, as of now, what you would call a boom, a 5-star number 3 quarterback in the country, especially if you factor in his ranking, the amount of NIL resources being put into the position. So you guys, maybe you disagree with me, but right now I'm leaning bust for Nico Iamaliava, end quote. There's a lot of things in there I agree with, okay? He says, one thing that I agree with, he says, it's not over yet. Clearly it's not over yet. He talks about NIL, and like what he can view as a bust and what I view as a bust can be completely different. What I view as a bust and what you view as a bust can be completely different. Sure, if you take the name, image, and likeness angle into this, strictly on just that, has he performed to the reported $8 million contract? To this point, no. If you take rankings into perspective, has he was number 3 in the on-3 industry rankings, but number 3 overall player in the country, a specific on-3 rankings for the class of 2023. Has he lived up to that number 1 ranking to date? No, he is not. Also, on the flip side, number 1, was he a bad quarterback this year? No, he was not. Was he a horrendous quarterback this year? No, he was not. It was his first year starting quarterback. He is a redshirt freshman, a second year in college. And oh yeah, the biggest caveat in all this, he was the starting quarterback who started every single game for a team that made the 12-team college football playoffs. That's the biggest That's the biggest factor to point at in this discussion, in my opinion. And that's why I'm going to continue to point at it. It's interesting, it's one of those things to where, again, different people can have different conversations and look at different things. And I respect what Newberg does and what he said. I disagree with what he said on this, but he's even leaving it open-ended to where he says, I know it's too early right now. It's not over. This can change, and it very well can change. But when you look at it from that perspective, NIL, overall ranking and all that, 5-star, okay, I get it. When you look at it from he led his team to the college football playoff, he's a redshirt freshman, he's still young, I don't get it. And also, we're going to play this game once again, shall we? We're going to play this game once again. I continue to bring in these other highly rated top quarterbacks in the class of 2023. Okay? I didn't listen to the whole segments, so I don't know if he commented on any of these other guys. I'm sure he did. But when you talk about Nico Iamaliava, if you call Nico Iamaliava a bust right now, you need to call everybody else not named Arch Manning a bust in that top tier of quarterback rankings in 2023. Nico's numbers, 18 games, 14 games started, okay? That's the most of anybody else I'm going to talk about right now. 21 touchdowns, the most of any quarterback I'm about to mention right now. 5 interceptions of a full-time starter or a guy that's played 18 games. That's the fewest interceptions of anybody I'm about to talk about right now. 2,930 yards, the most of any quarterback I'm about to mention. The 6 rushing touchdowns, more than any quarterback I'm about to mention, okay? So Nico's got better numbers than every quarterback I'm about to mention right now, plus he's played more, okay? But these top-tier guys in the class of 2023, all right, Nico is number 1. Arch Manning was number 2. Arch has been fine. He hasn't been a full-time starter. He's about to be, okay? We're about to truly evaluate how good Arch Manning is. In 12 games, he's got 2 starts, 9 touchdowns, 2 picks, 66.3 completion, 969 yards passing, 4 rushing touchdowns. Solid numbers. He's not been a full-time starter, so we can't really say anything about Arch right now. Or, if you want to, you could say he's a bust because he was the number 2 overall player in the cycle, and he hadn't been a starter yet, if you want to look at it that way. But I'm not going to look at it that way. Jackson Arnold, Oklahoma's quarterback, who has since transferred to Auburn. He was the number 3 quarterback in the On3 rankings. 17 games, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 62% completion, not horrible. 1,984 yards passing, that's not good. 4 rushing touchdowns. It's very underwhelming there for Jackson Arnold, who's played almost as much football as Nico has, almost. But he's also been benched. Dante Moore, again, who signed with UCLA and is now at Oregon, okay? 14 games played, 11 touchdowns. These are career games, career stats. 9 interceptions, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, not good. 54% completion percentage, not good. 1,659 yards passing, not good. 0 rushing touchdowns, negative rushing yards. Dante Moore, to this point in his career, not even close to that of Nico Iamaliava. Malachi Nelson, who, again, we've talked about, signed with USC, transferred to Boise State, and has since transferred to UTEP, and he is going to be the starting quarterback for the Miners this year in 2025. Malachi Nelson, 4 games played, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 128 yards passing, no rushing touchdowns, negative rushing yards. And then there's Jaden Rashada, who, again, he had the whole, I'm going to commit to Miami, I'm going to commit to Florida, sign to Florida, get out of the NLI, transfer to Arizona State, transfer to Georgia, and is now back in the portal, okay? We talked about that a couple of shows ago. In 3 games in his career over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 almost stops, okay? 6 on the way. 3 games played in 2 years, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, 53% completion, 485 yards passing, 0 rushing touchdowns. Okay, there are other quarterbacks in that class that weren't as highly rated. Sam Levitt, Arizona State, Lenora Sellers at South Carolina, Austin Simmons, who's about to be the starting quarterback at Ole Miss, Marcel Reed, who's the starting quarterback at Texas A&M. There are other good quarterbacks in this class, but of those top-tier guys, if you're calling Nico Iamaliava, if you're leaning bust to this point, you should honestly, even Arch as well, you should honestly have all these guys in that top tier number 1 class of the Iamaliavas, the Mannings, the Arnold, the Moores, the Nelsons, the Rashadas. They should all be bust. If you're leaning bust for Nico, they should all be bust. That's my opinion. I know we've had this conversation a couple of different times. I respect Josh Newberg. I think he does a heck of a job. I think he really, really does. I enjoy watching his content. He does an awesome job for the On3 family. I disagree with what he said on that take, and that's fine. Again, a lot of you guys disagree with some of the things I say. That is A-okay. That's just kind of my 2 cents, kind of reacting to that. Give Josh a listen. Check out all this stuff. Check out what our family of shows are. Andy and Ari, JD Piquel, Josh Newberg, the Wilt Vaughn Whip Around, Chad Simmons, our national guys at On3 do a really, really, really good job. I encourage you to check out all that content. All right, that is going to do it here for a Thursday Locked On Vols. Busy show. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll come back, get you set for the weekend here on a Friday, get you set for hoops over the weekend as well. All this and more right here on Locked On Vols.